When we think of karma in Buddhism and of accumulating good karma, we often think of it as leading towards a kind of complete moral purity. But there's a certain amount of daylight between, in Buddhism that is, between accumulating good karma and true moral purity. And that's something that I want to discuss in today's video. Because for the Buddha, karma, the accumulation of karma, of good karma, was firmly in the realm of samsara, in the realm of birth and death, in the realm of Mara, the tempter, this legendary character that keeps us attached to the world. Now, to illustrate this, let's look at an early sutta that makes some pretty shocking claims. This is the sutta on the lump of salt. Now, the main point of that sutta is relatively straightforward. It's to argue, the Buddha argues, that karma is not like what we might term, it's what's termed the lex talionis, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of reward or punishment. That is, karma does not work where you have to suffer exactly the fate that you meted out to somebody else or get exactly the benefit that you've given to somebody else. It doesn't work that way. If it did, then we might say karma, there would be no way out from under karma. We would be eternally caught in the cycle of samsara because we would always be having to face the same kinds of benefits and ills that we had given out to the world. In that sutta, the Buddha talks about how we can minimize the results of bad karma by essentially collecting a lot of good karma, by doing beneficial actions. His simile, his metaphor here, is the metaphor of the lump of salt. So we might say that if you dissolve a lump of salt in a small bowl of water, it's going to make the water essentially undrinkable. In the same way, for the Buddha, if somebody with a little bit of good karma causes bad karma to arise, they're going to experience that bad karma very strongly. However, also we can think of dissolving that same lump of salt, that same karmic action, bad karma we might say, in the Ganges River. Now, if we do that, we can hardly taste the salt at all. Perhaps we can't even taste it. It's there, but so minimally that we can't even taste it. And so the Buddha compares this to the case of somebody who's created a lot of good karma for themselves. The person who's created a lot of good karma may do the same bad action, but experience no, or what we might say virtually no, karmic fruition from that. There will be some fruition for the Buddha, but it might be so little that it's hardly detectable. Okay, so far so good. But the two human parables that the Buddha uses to illustrate this concept are, I think they're brilliant and they're incisive, but they're also very troubling. The first one of these, the Buddha gives two, the first one of these, the scholar Piya Tan describes as the parable of crime and punishment. Here the Buddha says, take the case of a person who was thrown in jail for stealing $50, or literally half a kahapana, $1 or $100, while another person isn't thrown in jail for stealing $50, $1, or $100. What kind of person is thrown in jail for stealing? A person who is poor, with few possessions and little wealth. What kind of person isn't thrown in jail for stealing? A person who is rich, affluent, and wealthy. Now, the second of these parables, Piya Tan calls the parable of the poor and the rich. Here we read, it's like a sheep dealer or butcher. They can execute, jail, fine, or otherwise punish one person who steals from them, but not another. What kind of person can they punish? A person who is poor, with few possessions and little wealth. What kind of person can't they punish? A ruler or their chief minister who is rich, affluent, and wealthy. That's the kind of person they can't punish. In fact, all they can do is raise their joined palms and ask, please, good sir, give me my sheep or pay me for it. So in the latter case, all the person can do is basically beg the powerful person to pay for what they've taken. Now, I say that these parables are brilliant and incisive because clearly they accurately reflect the way that wealth and power work in the real world. It is, as we all know, exceedingly difficult to truly punish a wealthy and powerful person for bad actions that they have done, in the same way that it's not difficult to punish somebody who is not powerful and wealthy. And, of course, fines to a wealthy person often prove trivial. They're fines that the person can pay without trouble. They become what's often known as just simply the cost of doing business. However, for the same reason, these two parallels are very clearly troubling. After all, they're supposed to illustrate for us the two different cases where the person with a little bit of good karma creates bad karma, as versus the case where a person with a lot of good karma creates bad karma. The implication here is pretty clear. That is, that the poor and powerless person is the person with only a little good karma, and that the wealthy and powerful person is the person with a lot of good karma. And the implication is, I think, even more troubling when we consider people who are born into poverty, born into a lack of powerlessness, or those who are born into wealth and born into power. That, of course, brings the karmic seeds or karmic origins back to a prior lifetime, and threatens, I think, to blame the victim, and to let off the person who is doing the best, to essentially pardon the powerful and wicked for their own inability to be punished for things that they do. This is one reason why I prefer to set aside stories of past life karma. But that said, I think that the main issue here is one of mistaking the accumulation of good karma for the true aim of Buddhist practice. Because, as I said at the beginning, karma for the Buddha is really the realm of samsara. It's the worldly aim. It's the aim of Mara the tempter. It's the aim that keeps us attached to the world. For the Buddha, yes, accumulating good karma can get us into positions of wealth and power, but once in those positions, we're placed in a place where we can violate the rules of good karma, where we can abuse that power and abuse that wealth in ways that do not come to harm us. And in that way, we can become easily corrupted. Power and wealth corrupt. This shows, I think, how the accumulation of good karma can be intoxicating. And it can get us to a place where the corruption that we involve ourselves in by having achieved that good karma then undermines the karma itself and leads to its own destruction and downfall. Now, clearly the point is not to say that we should instead be building up bad karma, not at all. It's rather to say that the point of Buddhist practice is not to build up karma at all. The point is to get to a point where we leave karma aside. This involves our practice to the point at which a person who has developed their body, ethics, mind, and wisdom, they're not small-minded, but are big-hearted, living without limits. So this is more like our true aim. This is more like what we're aiming towards for the Buddha. But many of these terms here, I think, are somewhat unclear, so let's try to unpack them. When the Buddha says a developed body, a person who's developed their body, at least the analysis from scholar Piya Tan, it seems to involve, obviously, our not mortifying the body, but keeping it healthy and maintaining sense restraint, not allowing the body to become drawn this way and that through the senses. When he talks about ethics, he, of course, means that we certainly avoid accumulating bad karma. That's part of our practice. Mind and wisdom here involve meditation and insight. But being big-hearted and not small-minded, this is a translation that I think implies that we cultivate the Brahma-viharas, that we cultivate kindness and compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity. Now, in the Sutta, the Buddha says that these are the virtues, essentially, of the person who only suffers a small amount of ill effect from bad karma that they've done. But I think more is implied. It's not simply that they've accumulated a lot of good karma by these practices, but that they're beginning to, or perhaps even will have, eventually moved out of the realm of karmic accumulation altogether. These are virtues that get us off of this hamster wheel of accumulation of wealth and power that eventually leads to its own corruption and downfall, and rather gets us essentially, as I say, off this wheel. These are the virtues of mindfulness, of kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and eventually true wisdom. Now, the Buddha discusses these various kinds of karma, and indeed, we might say the karma that leads beyond karma, in a different sutta. I've discussed it in a different video about 4 kinds of karma, and I'll leave a link to that video up here on the screen if you want to hear more about that kind of end that the Buddha directs us to. Thanks again for watching, and if you're getting something out of these videos and enjoying them, consider taking a look at my Patreon page, which is linked up here on the screen and down below in the notes, and see if you want to help support the channel and the work that I'm doing. Thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next video. And meanwhile, all of you, be well.